Hey everyone, Hans here, and today another video in my, let's call it intent data series, where I'm building intent type data from scratch using sources available to us on the internet. So today I've built a table. Well, actually, the other day I built a table. Today I'm showing you how I did it on using job posts to see what types of work, what types of services companies are most likely to outsource and then reach out based on that. I think it's a pretty interesting table, and I've got a lot of requests from people who want access to it. So today I'm sharing the table, I'm sharing the workflow and how you can do it for yourself, and how you can score companies that have budget, that have recently been funded, that are likely to outsource because they're in need of specific skills within their company. So without further ado, let's dive in and see how we did this. Here's the clay table that I built. So this is what the end result looks like. Now, how I started the clay table, and there are a bunch of different ways you can start it, honestly. So this one, I got companies from Crunchbase. So companies have been funded within the last 6 months. You can obviously apply some different filters for yourself, saying, okay, we don't work with enterprise, or we don't work with really early startups. Obviously, up to you what type of filtering you want to apply. But to start this list, there's about 1,500, well, 1,400 companies in there. And what I did, I got the URL from Crunchbase. Then off of that, I used LinkedIn to enrich the companies. So if you're not familiar with Clay's LinkedIn enrich function, there are a lot of columns that you can get from there. The company description, the exact employee headcount, etc., etc. And we use that enrichment function to get the description, company type, and then based on that, we were able to then enrich them with open jobs. So there's a waterfall available in Clay that allows you to look for open jobs, not only using, for example, predict leads, who, as far as I'm aware, mostly scan job boards. But then imagine predict leads doesn't find anything, then look for open jobs on LinkedIn. Then, if there are jobs found there, then stop the workflow, because otherwise you're going to have a mix of different jobs and you're going to have a lot of duplicates, etc. But if then there's nothing found on predict leads or on LinkedIn, then try looking on Google. And that's where you usually find a lot of jobs, because Google has a really high match rate and is able to look at multiple sources to get you the jobs that you need. Then, depending on the amount of job openings a company has, we can already apply a bit of a score to them. So, saying, okay, a company got recently funded, they have one or two job openings. Yeah, it could be that they're willing to outsource that. Obviously, it really just depends on what they do, and what type of thing they're looking for and what they mention in their job post. But as you can imagine, a company that has more job openings, that has a lot more roles they would need to fulfill, they're more likely to outsource that. Then we got the job openings. Then what we did is we used the formula to get all the job openings, so all the job titles in here. So if you, for example, click into this one, there are a lot of different jobs in here. In this case, there are 10 different job titles in here. Then we want to apply some sort of analysis on those job titles to just see how, like, where they fit, what types of people, what types of roles they're looking to fill these companies. So here's a basic formula where we get the open jobs. So all the open jobs, and then the titles, it will get those and will turn it into a comma separated list. So you just basically have a list of all the job titles that company has open, and then that way. So I have the formula in it 3 times, just because we have 3 different columns with jobs, and then we merge them all together. And then here you have your main column with all the job titles. And then we use OpenAI to say, okay, this or that company is currently hiring for the following job titles. And then there's the entire prompt. So I'll walk you through the prompt and I'll show you what I started with and what I ended up with to give you an idea of just how restrictive you have to be with OpenAI. So here's the prompt that I started with. So as you can see, it's a large one. So basically, we're telling it this and that company is in the X industry with this amount of employees. This is their job. This is their company description. They're currently hiring for the following titles. Now we label some companies as likely to outsource this or that. We do this by combining raw data, human intuition, so I got this from I got parts of this from a website that does this, but I think as a prompt it works. It could work pretty well. That's what I thought. And then so as data would take into consideration all these things like industry, market stage, funding amount, the type of company that it is, and then so there's a type of company that it is, and then taking in consideration that type of company. So a healthcare startup that stores sensitive information and use the word trust on its website is very likely a good fit for a cybersecurity business. So we didn't actually get keywords from the website, but we do have the company description. So I substituted the keywords from the website for the company description to have that as, let's say, keywords. And then based on that information, I wanted to pick from these departments just because I know that restricting OpenAI, GPT, whatever you want to call that, restricting it is always helpful. Plus, I wanted it to have really clear labels. Say, okay, they're looking to outsource this, or at least something that fits in these, under these labels in these departments, and that just for the use case I'm using it for, just makes it a lot easier. And it's just a way to restrict creativity a bit, just because the less you restrict creativity, the in my personal experience, the worse and the more all over the place your responses are often going to be, which in some cases is okay if you're looking for just some really good output and you're okay with manually going through the bad output. But we don't want that for our use case. We want to make sure that we get the best, that we get closest to reality, the truth. So that's why we wanted to restrict it and label it just based on these departments. So that's the prompt that we started with, but then um, it was making up a lot of things based on company description and on all the input that we gave it. It was coming back with a lot of really bad suggestions that didn't fit within these departments at all, or maybe it fit within the department, but there was absolutely no clear indication as to why that company would be willing to outsource it. So took that out, and now we just ended up with, okay, company name are currently hiring for all these job titles right here. Then we label them as likely to outsource by looking at what types of job positions they have open, and then based on that information, pick one department and do not ever use any other department, etc., etc. So that's now what it's doing. It's looking at all the titles that they're hiring for, and then labeling based on those job titles. Then we ask it to provide the output in JSON format, just because that makes it easier for us to then add that as columns. Because then if you open up the response, then you're able to add these as columns. So then you have the types of departments they're most likely to outsource for based on the job openings that they currently have. Now, if you combine that with things like, okay, when were they funded, what is their current headcount, and how many job openings do they currently have open, you get a pretty decent idea of which company is more likely to outsource. Then if you want to get even closer, you could say, okay, I'm going to have a selection of only companies that have at least 50 job openings, or maybe at least 20 job openings that have the keyword marketing in there. And then you can actually get all those actual job posts, and you can start analyzing those and seeing what they need, and then scoring that as to how likely they are to outsource it. that would be pretty easy if you're just looking at one use case. So if you're saying, hey, I want to really dive into the engineering use case or marketing, and then really dive into, okay, what are they most likely to outsource within marketing, and then based on the job post, what will be the responsibilities, and how likely are they to actually outsource it? Do they mention any type of urgency? Do they mention that they're not willing to work with any outside companies? That type of thing. You sometimes see that. So all those things you can then throw into the mix and score based on that. But doing that for something this broad would mean you end up with a massive data set that just doesn't make any sense. So if you're, for example, a marketing company and you want to dive deeper into this, then this could be your first step, and then you dive deeper into the companies that actually have the marketing label on there. Same goes for if you're a software development company, then okay, do they have the information technology label, or there are other ones that are in there that that would apply, and then you dive deeper into those. So this will be your first scoring step, and then you move on to your steps 2 and 3, and then you build a data set based on that. This just to give you some inspiration, to give you an idea of what's possible, and hopefully you'll find it helpful. If you want some help building out that data set, let me know. Otherwise, hope this is helpful and you're able to build it yourself. I'll share a table with anyone thanks to the Core Clay future, so you can actually dive in there and see how I built this, and hopefully you can use that. For now, thanks for watching, and see you in the next one. Bye bye.